Hello, happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to the Sword and Trail Revival Fellowship. It's our Valentine's service. I'm delighted that you could be here with us. Those of you joining us online, those of you who are here with us in person, I pray that we have a good service today. You'll get a blessing out of it. Now, I've been preaching a lot lately about judgment, about hell, about the last days and things coming, and I thought for Valentine's Day we'd just take a break of that. Sorry, there's our baby, our little 1-year-old's making some noise. Take a break from that from a little bit and just talk to you about love and romance and Valentine's Day type stuff. This is going to be the first sermon in a series of sermons that we're going to be doing on the family, on love, on relationships, on raising children. And I pray that you will be able to join us for all of the upcoming services. I believe it'll be a blessing to you. I believe it'll help you in relationships, and I believe it will help you grow in your faith with God. A few weeks ago, my wife got me a movie, and it was actually a Valentine's Day type movie. We got it. I don't know if it was a late Christmas present or if she gave it to me for Christmas. I just didn't open it until later. But it was about I can't even think of the name of it. But it was about a couple of girls who were they were sisters, and as they were growing up, they were the type of girls who always tried to help other people with their relationships, and they would try to put people together and get dates arranged for the prom and stuff. And as you're going through the movie, you find out that their parents are in the process of going through a divorce, and the girls, as they're sitting here trying to help get their parents back together at the same time, you comes to find out in the movie that the dad is actually Cupid, the Greek god Cupid, and that he gave up immortality as a Greek god to come and be with this woman. And then they had a couple of daughters. But even though he was Cupid and he was the god of love, so to speak, even he had difficulty holding his relationship together. And the reason for that, and as you're watching the movie, and they do get back together in the end, the dad and the mom, or husband and wife, but as you're looking at how they are trying to relate to each other, you find that it wasn't so much that he had fallen out of love with her, or that she had fallen out of love with him. It was that they had lost their ability to be able to communicate relationships, love, and romance. And so the title of today's sermon is called Discovering Your Love Language. Discovering Your Love Language. I thought it was just an excellent type of thing for a Valentine's Day service. I've been reading some books lately about relationships and love and romance. And our text that we're going to go off of today is in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. If you have your Bibles, it says, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal." Now that word charity, as translated in the King James Bible, is the Greek word agape. And if you ever heard the term agape love, not too far away from here, there's a veterinary clinic that's called Agape, and is talking about that unconditional love that people have for animals. Thayer's Greek definitions defines agape as brotherly love, affection, goodwill, love, or benevolence. Charity is a love that kind of, and when you think of charity, I think of charity as in at Christmas time when you go and they have the Salvation Army out the stores and you put some quarters in there for the people who are down, but always doing good deeds for people. That word charity gets its name for your love for others who don't have what you have, and you are giving of yourself for them. It's love. And so in this chapter, every time we find the word charity, just for the ease of understanding, I am going to substitute love for the word charity. It continues, "And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I can remove mountains and have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long and is kind. Love envieth not or does not envy. Love vaunteth not itself." That's that proud boasting. It does not boast of itself. lost my place here. Love is not puffed up or proud. Love does not behave itself unseemly, seeks not her own, is not easily provoked, thinks no evil. Love rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Love bears in all things, believes in all things, hopes in all things, endures all things. And the beginning of verse 8 there says, love never fails. I could give you the illustration of a little girl. She went to school and she had heard the story of Snow White. And she came home and she was all excited about hearing that story of Snow White and came home to tell her mom about it. And she was telling her mom about how Snow White was asleep, and then the Prince Charming came in and he bent over and kissed her, and that kiss of love woke her back up. And then she says, and you'll never believe what happened next, Mommy. And the mom says, I know what happened next. They lived happily ever after. And the little girl says, no, they got married. And I think that's the way it is for some of us today. Probably the number one question that you would find in marriage counseling, talking to people who, and obviously if they're getting marriage counseling, they're probably having some sort of problems in their relationship. And the number one question says, we were so in love before we got married, but then we got married and something happened. What happened to the love? It's like the magic is gone, that spark, that thing. I remember when I first met my wife, and I don't promote this. My son David is one of these. He is waiting to share that first kiss until he is married. My son Matthew recently got married, and I believe that he did not have a kiss with his wife until they actually exchanged their vows. And those are wonderful things. I confess I wasn't that way when I met my wife. And it was the second day after we had met, and we were having a cookout, and we kind of snuck a little kiss. And and while we did that, and as I kissed her, I mean, just sparks started flying like crazy, and my heart was pounding, and I had butterflies in my stomach, and I was all nervous about what it was going to be like with that first kiss. And that first kiss was amazing. And a lot of people feel that way. And then they get married, and something happens, and the magic is gone. If you walk down through grocery stores and as you're shopping and you get to the book section, I'm sure at some point or another you've walked past that section, and they always have the best sellers there of the books. And if you stop to take a look at the books, there'll be a few action stuff and some spy things and things like that. But most of those books, and the best sellers, are books on marriage, on love, and on keeping the love. And they always have catchy titles and catchy phrases like 101 surefire ways to keep your love happy, or 15 methods that will make it so you stay in love forever. And it's funny because we have the reality, even with all these books and all this material and all this stuff on being able to help relationships and love, many would say today, yes, we are married, but we're not in love. I'm going to talk to you today about a book that I read. I first read this book a number of years ago, probably about 20 years ago, but I was just refreshing myself on it as I was getting ready to prepare for this sermon. And the book is called The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. The 5 Love Languages. It's an excellent book. I was actually going to show you the cover, but I was reading the book upstairs this afternoon, and I left it up there, and I'm not going to stop to run up there and get that book for you. But The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. In this book, Dr. Chapman talks about, he makes the statement, the problem isn't whether we're in love or not, is that we speak different love languages. The theme today that we are going to be talking about, and the theme and the services that are coming up, is that we are going to love no matter what, and love is always right. And as I mentioned, we're going to be doing a series. In fact, as I was preparing for this sermon today, the 5 love languages, I was actually thinking I would be able to get all 5 love languages into one sermon. But as I was developing my notes and seeing how it was going, I know that that's not possibly going to be able to happen. And we're probably going to be doing this for a couple of weeks. Maybe we can squeeze it in next week and finish it up, possibly a third week after that. We're going to lay the groundwork today, and we're probably just going to get into the first love language today, but there's a lot of things and some things that are going to be a blessing for you and some things. So I just really, I hope that you'll be able to stick with us for these services that are coming up, not just today's, but you'll come and join us for next week's service and then the following weeks as well, and that you will come and be with us for this time in the family. I would like to take a moment to compare the love languages to just normal speaking. Let's say that all of the people here in this room, you spoke a different language than me. What if you over there spoke Russian, and perhaps you spoke Spanish, and perhaps you spoke French, or maybe you out there listening to me online, maybe you speak Portuguese or Chinese, Mandarin. I know there's several different languages in China alone, and all those different languages. And if I'm getting up here and I'm speaking and I'm doing things and you can't understand me, then you're not going to be benefiting from anything that I'm saying. And the reality is that in order for us to be able to speak and converse with each other, someone is going to have to do something to communicate with the other one. Either I am going to have to take the time to learn your language so I can speak with you properly, or you are going to have to take the time to learn my language so you can listen to me properly. And it's the same with our aspect of love. I could relate it to people learning a second language. The language that you learned first, your native language, it was a lot easier for you than learning a second language. You learn things as you were learning your language. You pick up like this, and you learn what glasses were, and you could see it. But now as you're sitting trying to learn what those words are in another language, it can be difficult. And just like with learning the language that you have, all of you have a love language that you have naturally inside of you. The problem is that when we're with our mates, they might communicate a different love language than you. And perhaps you are doing something to express love to them that doesn't mean anything to them at all, and they are trying to express love to you that doesn't mean anything to you. And we're not going through the same languages, and it's difficult, and we can't seem to grasp what's going on. The first thing that I want you to see in our sermon today is that the language of love you speak, you probably learned when you were very young, the way you were your native tongue when you spoke. If you spoke English as your native tongue, and you were raised in a home where your parents speak English, then you probably spoke English or speak English. And other people who were raised in other countries, and you learned a different language, you grew up that same way, learning that language. It's the same with love. And I would dare to say that the language that you love, the love language that you have, you probably got because it was the love language that was spoken between your parents and how they were with you and how they were with each other when you grow up. And so you might say, yeah, and I had a terrible experience from my parents at expressing love, and it was awful growing up. But what's happened is probably as a result, maybe you today have a tough time expressing love. I could give the illustration of a couple who go to the church that we went to for many years, and the gentleman, I won't say their names to protect the guilty, but this gentleman, he is a man of God. He went to church to become a preacher. He graduated from Bible college. He has campaigned at several different churches to become a pastor. So far that the Lord has not opened up that door for him yet. And he is just a member of the church. And his wife and my wife started to get close. And my wife had her over for dinner one night when he was working or he was not around. And she came over for dinner. And she was talking to us about how her husband, it doesn't matter, despite his knowledge of the Bible, despite how he loves the Lord, her husband does not communicate love with her. She said that she could not even remember a single time in her life that her husband ever told her, "I love you." And I know this man, and I would be at church, and sometimes you go to fellowship, and this is back before COVID happened, and people could actually shake hands and hug each other. And a lot of times, those men will come up and just that brotherly love, "Brother, I love you," and you give a big old hug. Well, this guy wasn't that way. There's no hugging with this guy. You just go up and you shake his hand, say good morning, and that's it. He's done. He's done with that. And his wife, even in her wisdom, said that even though it was hard for her, she understood because his dad never told him that he loved him. And his dad didn't hug, and his dad didn't touch. And he, growing up in that home, learned that love language like his dad, and there is no touch. And she says, I know my husband loves me. I just wish at least once in a while he would tell me that he does. He provides for me, he takes care of me, he just doesn't tell me he loves me. You'll find that there are different ways that people measure receiving love, and different ways that we measure giving out love. And you may find that you get upset with the way that you're receiving love. But someone else, you're not even stopping to think that someone else might be very upset with the way that you are giving it to them. And in your marriage, just like the speaking different verbal languages, your love language is probably different than your mate. Just because you both speak English doesn't mean that your love language is going to be the same. There are different love languages and different ways that we express love. There's a book. It's a really good book. I would encourage you all to read this one as well. I can't remember the name of the gentleman, his first name, but his last name is Harley. And the book is titled His Needs, Her Needs. It's a very effective book about a man getting ready to get married. And he realizes as he's getting ready to get married that his fiancée, or his soon-to-be wife, that she has needs that differ from his. And vice versa. He has needs that differ for hers. And as they're going through and they're trying to find out each other's needs and how to be able to relate each other. And people are different. God made us different. We're going to be talking in these next services about how God made men and women differently. And we have different ways that we think of things in different roles. But just here in ourselves, in our marriages, God made us different. We don't think the same. We don't do things the same way. I see it with my own kids. We were talking at dinner tonight. There are some kids that have personalities, at least in certain aspects, that are very much like mine. And then we have other kids whose personalities are nothing like mine at all. Even though they're all my kids, even though they're raised in the same home, even though I was still their dad. We have different personalities in different ways. And these kids, as we express love to them, we realize that they receive and get love in different ways than other kids. Why is that? It's because we're different. It's important that we learn that. It's important that we learn that we are not all the same, that we are different. Harley talks about in his book on how all of us have a love bank. I want you to think of love for a moment as a bank. And everything that you... Sorry, my phone's charging over there and it went off. I apologize for that. Everything that you do with your mate is either making deposits and withdrawals into their love account. And every day we need to be making deposits. And that's why... and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about, because some of us are trying to express our language of love to the other person, but it's like trying to run a card that doesn't work in that bank account, or trying to write a check for a different bank account than what's there, or trying to put money into that bank account when you don't have that right bank account. Because I could be sitting there trying to put money into it all day long, but if I don't have the right numbers for the bank account, it's not going to go in. And just like that, some of them, sometimes we try to express love to our mate or our children or something, and that language of love is not accepted. We don't feel it the same way. I have my son Colin. Colin does not like to be touched. He doesn't like hugs. He doesn't like any kind. I'll sneak up behind him and I'll put my arms around him and give him a big old hug. And if he doesn't realize what I'm doing, he'll sit there for a moment. The other day I busted him. He was out trying to get a box of cereal out of the cupboard. And I went up and I gave him a hug. And he was concentrating on that cereal. And he didn't even realize what I was doing. And then I said, Colin, I'm hugging you. And then he flipped out. He was like trying to get away. And I kind of chased him around the house a little bit. Because Colin does not receive love in the form of touch. And that's because he's different. We're all different. And when we try to express our love to one another and try to share love with someone else, if they don't receive that love the same way that we're trying to give it, we have the problem. We keep trying to give it the same way because that's how we measure love. And you keep trying to jam it in and jam it in and jam it in and push it in, but it doesn't work. And that just pushes people away. And as we're doing this study today, I want you to, some of you might have the attitude, and I want you to think about this. If you have the attitude that says, this is how I was when he met me, And he's just got to learn to love me for who I am, because this is who I am, and he's married to me, or she's married to me, and she just needs, or he just needs to love me for who I am. Or if you have this attitude, I'll love you on my terms. If you can't accept it, well, then you're just not going to have it. Or perhaps this attitude, I'll love you the only way I know how, and if you don't like it, then you can lump it. Well, the reality of the situation is that if that's the kind of attitude that you have coming into this, then eventually that love bank will go empty, it will become overdrawn, and what's going to happen is someone else is going to come along who's going to be very willing to deposit into that bank, and they will have the right language. And that's why things fall apart so easily. I've seen couples where tragedy strikes their home, and for most normal couples, that would be enough to tear their marriage apart, and they would fall apart and they would no longer be married. But somehow they were able to make it. Why is that? Because they had a type of relationship where deposits were made into their love account. And then when that tragedy struck, then there was enough love deposited in there that they were able to get through. I've seen other couples where something happens in their marriage that shouldn't even be a hiccup in most marriages, and yet that is the thing that ends it all. And you find when you're looking at that those kind of couples, they were just looking for a way out, and this gave them an excuse. Why? There was no love left. There was no love being put into that account, and it became overdrawn. And then when that happened, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. One thought I would like to share with you before I get into the first love language is that there is a difference between falling in love and real love. There's a difference between falling in love and real love. Falling in love is a temporary emotional high. It's something that you can't make yourself do. I believe that probably most, if not all the time, is something that you can't really keep yourself from doing. And if you look at people when they fall in love, I mean, they see that person, they like that person, and they are just gone. I mean, that's just, I love them, I want to be with them. It's an incredible, sparks are flying, there's lightning, there's thunder, it's excitement. Well, real love is different. Falling in love is temporary. Real love takes reason and desire. I said you can't make yourself fall in love, and you can't really keep yourself from falling out of love. Real love is something that you are involved with, and you have to make a decision about. Falling in love is obsession. Real love is commitment. Falling in love takes no energy. I mean, you fall in love, it's cool, it's exciting. I mean, you don't have to work on it, it just happens. But real love takes work and discipline. Falling in love can be a euphoric experience, whereas real love is realistic, it's reality. And as I'm sitting here describing these, you can say, preacher, I take the falling in love over the real love. And if I can just get that and keep it forever, all the rest sounds kind of boring. It sounds hard. It just sounds like work. But the reality is that you can't have falling in love forever. And the day will come when you stop falling or fall out or fall away from love. And if you don't have real love there to be able to replace it, then you're going to be like a lot of couples today who are getting divorced and getting out of their marriages because they just don't love anymore. Real love is a commitment. You say, can it be exciting? It can be incredible. Real love can fulfill every need. It can fulfill every emotion. It can fulfill every desire for love that you have. And if we learn properly how to give love to our mate, then we can learn how to communicate that love, then it can be incredible. Real love can be an incredible thing, even after the falling in love is getting away. So let's get right into it. Let's get into the first love language. Love language number 1 is words of affirmation. Now, there are 5 love languages, as I said, and we're probably only going to be able to get through the first one today. today. I'll just briefly hit on the others. The second love language is quality time. And some people express love in forms of quality time with each other. And a lot of people, in fact, do that. Another one is physical touch. Some people express love through that physical contact. Another love language is gifts or gift giving. If you've ever, some of you men, you go out Valentine's Day like it is here, and you grab that dozen of roses and you give it to that person that you love or that you care about. That's an expression of love. And some people, I've heard of people who have done that, and then the girl, she's upset that she gets it because she's like, what are you trying to do, buy my affection? Well, what's happened was he was expressing love, but it wasn't a love language that she was able to take, because gift giving is not her love language. And so she doesn't see that as love. And another one is acts of service, doing nice things for people. And we'll get into all of these things coming up. But let's just focus on the first one today. Love language number 1, words of affirmation. What are words of affirmation? Words of affirmation are words that build up people. Words are important. They build you up. Solomon talked about this in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. He says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Understand what he says here. He says, with what you say, you can give life. Think about your marriage. Think about that life and love in your marriage. Or with what you say, you can give death. And he says that the tongue is such an important thing. And if you give love with it, it can be it says you shall eat the fruit thereof. That's the reward. It can be a rewarding and inspiring and incredible thing if you give love with it, not death. Verbal affirmation is so important. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25 says, heaviness in the heart of a man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad. I remember reading once about Mark Twain, and he had made the statement that he said that I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. And I just did a little bit of math there, and that means that you should be able to get by for a whole year on about 6 compliments. Well, I think in reality, many of us need a lot more than that. Verbal affirmation is so important. Affirmation is a good word, a compliment. A compliment is an incredible thing, and we need to understand the importance of it. I think of the way the English language is spoken today. And there's different ways that we can compliment each other. Just speaking in English, thinking about English-speaking countries, we speak it here in the United States differently than they speak it in England. And there are different parts of England where they'll speak it differently. They speak it differently in London than they speak it somewhere else. They speak it differently there than they do in Scotland. It's spoken there than it's different in Wales, or different than in Australia, or in Ireland they speak English, and then they have that brogue, that they have those accents that goes to it. Even here in America, English is spoken differently up in Boston than it is down in Louisiana and Georgia, where they have different accents. And there are things that are different words and mean different things. And I could go over to England and I could have someone say, I'm going to go over to that person's house and knock them up. And that just means they're going to go over and, hey, how are you doing? Visit them, knock on their door. But to knock someone up here in this country means an entirely different thing. And you could go over to England and hear someone say, can I bum a fag? And over there, a fag is a cigarette. And they're asking if they can borrow a cigarette for a smoke. Well, if I say that in this country, it means an entirely different thing. All right, different ways that we speak things mean different things. All right, the language, the way we speak it, the way we use can mean different things. I remember... if you're old enough to remember President George Bush, not George W. Bush, but his father when he was in office after Ronald Reagan, and we were going through the war in the Gulf, he would always talk to the dictator that we're fighting over there in Iraq, Saddam Hussein. He would always call him Saddam Hussein, not Saddam Hussein. And people would say, well, he's just saying his name funny. Well, there's a difference. See, in their language, Saddam means prince. But Saddam means a horse's rear end. And so, as he's calling him Saddam Hussein, it was something that was done deliberate. He was sending a message. He's like, I don't think of you as a prince. You're a horse's behind, and that's what I think of you, and that's what I'm going to say it. But just the way that he was saying it, spelled the exact same way. But it's the way that we would say it means the same thing. It can mean an entirely different thing. You know, verbal compliments, words of affirmation, they can mean different things. We'll get into that in a little bit. But just talking about compliments. For a wife to come up to her husband and say, wow, you're looking good today. I mean, wow, honey. I mean, you look sharp. You look great. You handsome thing. And it makes a man feel good. Or a man to say to his wife, wow, you look incredible. What a beautiful outfit you're wearing. Or, wow, your hair looks so beautiful today. Or, wow, honey, you smell so great today. Or maybe you could even compliment her as a cook. Now, in my home, my wife is disabled. She does cook if she can, but more often than not, I cook because she is unable to because of her disability. And I try to do different things. And I want to spice up the meals and give us some excitement, so I try new meals and new recipes and add stuff together. And people are all sitting around the table, and I'm sitting there wondering if they're going to like my food. And I'm listening to see if anyone's going to say, wow, Dad, this food tastes great. Or if it doesn't taste great, then I'm like, wow, I failed. I didn't do my job right. And I didn't show them that love in that way by trying to do this thing. But, that compliment, that means a good thing. And it's good for a wife to say to her husband, you're strong, you're handsome. Or a husband to say to his wife, wow, baby, you look hot today. And that does something for you. It makes you feel good inside. And I want to ask you a question. How would you feel if you were complimented every day by that person in your life? What would it do for you? Well, I can tell you one thing, just me guessing, but it might make you want to be around them a little bit more. If I go to work and my employer is constantly saying that I'm a lousy worker, that I'm slow, that I'm lazy, that I'm not going to be doing a good job, that doesn't really make me want to come to work and work for them. But if I go to a place where I'm working and they're like, wow, you do such a good job, you're such an asset to this company, we're so thankful that you came to work for you. Well, that might make me want to go to work there and maybe even work a little bit better. And it's the same that way in our marriage. There may be a marriage, and it goes something like this. The wife says, my husband is a slug. He's no good. He's good for nothing. He's lazy. He's a slob. He won't lift a hand around the house. And let's just pretend for the sake of this argument. Let's say that this is you, that you are the wife, and that you are coming to me to talk about this, and I am the pastor, and I am giving you, trying to help you in your marriage, and I'm going to counsel you on it. And you come to me and you say this to me about your husband. And let's just pretend that's you. And then I might respond to you and say something like, can you give me an example of this? And then you would say something like, yeah, he won't fix anything. This house, our house, is falling apart. And then I would say something like, well, what have you done to try to get him to do something? And then you might say, well, I tell him. I say to him, you get your lazy butt out of that chair and you get out there and you go fix something. I'm tired of living in this dump heap. And then I might say something like, and he doesn't jump when you say that? And then you say, no, he doesn't even move. What am I going to do about it? And I love this part of it. And I get excited to answer this question, and I will say something like, don't ever mention again that thing that you want him to do that he won't do. And I love seeing the reaction of someone after I say something like that. And some of you listening right there outline, if you're listening to me right now, you're probably getting upset that I would even say something like that. And you could say, what do you mean? Don't say that. What am I going to do about it? And I would say something like, figure out what he's doing that's good and compliment him on that instead. Start encouraging him and affirming him on the things that he does that are good. And inevitably, You could say something like, "Preacher, you're crazy." And I would say, "You try it. And you tell me later whether it works or not." And inevitably, those ladies out there, or you men, who would try that, you might come back and say, "You know what, that fence has fallen down, and he fixed that fence. He fixed that leaky faucet. He took care of those things." Why? Because you found a way to communicate with him that made him want to respond to some of those things. Now, I'm not telling you to come out and flatter your mate or to flatter people in order to get your way. I'm simply saying that people will respond to one who demonstrates love to them. Doesn't that make sense? When we tell you, "You are good, you're doing these things well," that makes you want to do things, to reciprocate, to do things back. But if I'm telling you that all you do is good for nothing, you don't want to give love back in that way. Please note this. Do not sorry, I got a little bit ahead of my notes. Let me go back. It makes sense to do nice things. These are compliments. That's one way that we share love. And just like I was mentioning that there are different dialects, there are different aspects of giving words of affirmation. Number 2 is this: it's encouraging words. Encouraging words are different than compliments, because compliments are trying to say, "Wow, you're doing a good job. You look good today." Encouraging words want to inspire you, to lift you up to do more. I could give you an example of a football team. The coach comes out and says, "Wow, guys, we got a good group of guys here. I mean, all of you, you look good. Your uniforms are nice and white and pressed, and you look sharp. And wow, your hair is looking good. We're going to go out there today, and you look good." And then the coach could come out and say, a different coach could come out and say something like, "All right, team, let's go out and we're going to win that game today. Why are we going to win that game today? Those guys out there, they might be bigger than you, stronger than you, but I've seen you come up and beat people like that before that were better than them. And you've done that. And you can do that again today. We can do this." Did you see the difference? See, the first one was just complimenting them on what they are. The second one was trying to encourage them to better themselves. Encouraging words. An example, I can talk about me and my wife, Samantha. All right, my wife is a person who just wants to spend her entire life in college. I mean, she has done so much with college. She has gone to so many different colleges and schools. She has a degree, an associate's degree in criminal justice. She has an associate's degree in human services. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology. She has a master's degree in theocentric psychology. She has a doctorate in Christian education. I mean, she also went to school for nursing and some other kind of teaching. And she's been in school forever, it seems. And sitting there and trying to do things. So as we came to the point where we were deciding we were not going to have our kids in public school, and we were going to discuss homeschooling, and I could, as I'm talking with my wife, and she's a little bit nervous on whether or not she's going to be able to homeschool or not. I'm like, "Honey, you can do this. You've got all of this education. You've done all of these things. You've done all this studying. This is something that you can do. This is something that you are able to do." I could say the same thing about me. There's been times here as after I started this church and was trying to find time. See, this is a small church. Obviously, you see where we're here. I'm not in a big pulpit up in a church somewhere. This is a room in our house, and the church is out of our home, and it's a small church, and I don't get a salary from this church, and I have to go out and I have to work other jobs. And as I'm sitting there and I'm doing other things and working to try to earn money, and I come home and I'm tired, and then I have to take the time to be able to put sermons together and get the sermon around, I get discouraged. And I sit there and I was talking to my wife, and I'm just like, I don't even really know if God has called me to do this anymore. This is just so hard. I'm getting burned out. And my wife would come in and she would say, "Honey, I love the way you preach, and when you preach, it speaks to me, and you have a message that you share, and I believe it talks to people and calls to people. Don't give up. You can do this. I will support you. I will be with you." These are encouraging words that help lift people up. And now please note this, by the way, there's a difference between pressure and encouragement. There's a difference between pressure and encouragement. What's the difference? You can only encourage where there's interest. I would not have been able to encourage my wife in homeschooling had she not already been expressing interest in having our kids not in public school anymore. And my wife could not try to talk me into preaching had I not already expressed interest in my life. It has to be something that they're interested in, and by the way, something that they're interested in, not something that you're interested in. What do you mean, preacher? Well, let me give you an instance. Let's just say that there was a husband who wanted his wife to lose weight. Buddy, you might think it's encouragement for you to go to your wife and say, honey, don't you think it would be a good idea for you to go on a diet? And you might think you're encouraging her to do that, but if she's not interested in that, you're not encouraging her, you're condemning her. It is not encouraging for you to say that. You're preaching at her. You've judged her. And by doing that, you are not encouraging love. You are rejecting him or her. Encouragement comes where there's interest. And now, and you could say, well, preacher, is there ever a time that I could say that? Well, if you were, I'll just use myself as an example for this. Use me. I could say, as I could be looking at myself in the mirror, and I could be upset that I used to have more up here, and now it's down here, and I don't look as good as I used to, in my opinion, and I could be complaining a little bit about it, and my wife says, you know what, this is something that's important to you. Tell you what, let's go get a gym membership, and we can all go to the gym together, and I will come along, and I will work with you, and I will encourage you and support you. And if your wife were to say something or be in that type of situation, then you would be able to do something to encourage her. It's something that she or he has to be interested in, not the other way around. By the way, encouraging words are not sympathetic words. There's a difference between sympathy and encouraging. Sympathy says, I'm sorry for you the way you are. When we have a death in your life and I give you a sympathy card, it's like, I am sorry for what has happened to you. I am sorry for the condition or situation that you're in. I am sorry for the way that you are. Encouraging says, I want to help you succeed. I want to lift you up. Encouraging is empathy, not sympathy. Now, this is a hard one for those of you to understand who came from a home where you were only criticized or condemned. And those of you listening, you might even say, preacher, this is stupid. I mean, this is nauseating, telling all this stuff about good words and giving compliments. It's just yuck. Well, probably that's because you speak a different love language than words of encouragement or words of affirmation, but I'll tell you that this language, this dialect, is a dialect worth learning. And it may be tough, but you need to learn it. Because I can guarantee you that there is somebody in your life that could deserve some words of encouragement. Maybe not you, but perhaps someone you love, perhaps your wife. Honey, can I have you not sit in that chair, please, because that camera's right there. And okay, thank you very much. The third dialect I want you to see is kind words. Kind words. I'll go back to our passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. It says, love is kind. It's not so much, by the way, with kind words, it's not so much what we say, but how we say it. And I was talking a little bit earlier the difference between Saddam Hussein and Saddam Hussein. What we say and how we say it makes a difference. I mean, I can say I love you, but there's a difference if I look at my wife and say, oh, baby, I love you. Wow, I mean, I love you. Or she could say, I love you so much. There's a difference because I could go and say, I love you. And I'm questioning it, like, why do I love you? The same words, but how I said it made a difference. You know, I've seen this as my kids have grown up, and I have our what number are you in the line of kids? Are you number 6? 7, 8, 9. Yeah, year number 6. Colin is our 6th kid, and he just hit his teenage years. He's 13 years old, and he's starting to go through that same teenage problem that all of the other previous teenagers with. I mean, we've had the other 5. We had our 5 older kids are grown and gone and on their own. Jeannie's married, and she's blessed us with 3 grandkids. Matthew is married. David's in college, and the other 2 girls are out on their own, and but as they're going through their teenage years, we're starting to have some trouble because they would say something to us, but depending on how they say is whether they're talking with us or whether it's back talk. There's a difference in how they say it. And they could say something to me, and I could respond like, "Don't get smart with me." And they would say, "I'm not getting smart." And I can turn around and say, "Well, you're right. What you're doing is not smart because of what's going to happen to you, the consequences, because you're talking to me this way." But, just the way they say it means an entirely different thing. And we've seen that with our teenagers when someone is sincere or whether being sarcastic. And it's the same in the Bible. In Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1, it says, "A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger." A soft answer, a kind answer. When we say things with kindness, it turns away anger. But if we say things sarcastically or little cuts, then it stirs up anger. By the way, just talking about this a little bit, love doesn't keep score. What do you mean by that, preacher? Well, I'll give you an example. My mom was a very bitter woman. My mom has passed away. She's gone home to be with the Lord, but she was a resentful person, and she would hold things and harbor things. I remember when I was a young little boy, there was my dad was a computer nerd, and he had other computer nerds that he would get together with, and they would meet once a night, and they would have computer nerd night, and they would get together and talk about computers. Well, one year, they had planned to have their computer nerd meeting on the same night as my parents' anniversary. And my dad didn't realize it. And so when he was telling his wife what day it was, and she's like, "Well, that's our anniversary." And he said, "Well, what do you want me to do? I don't have to go." And she's like, "No, go ahead. I want you to have fun. Go out. We'll just go out another night." Well, he did. And that was one of the biggest mistakes my dad could ever have made, was taking my parents' anniversary and going out and being with his computer nerd buddies, because my mom resents things, or she resented things, and she harbored things. And this is not the way that you can be. What would happen is, for years later, my mom would bring that up. I remember when my parents had their 11th anniversary, and my dad, as a gesture of love, got her 11 roses. And it was to symbolize, rather than a dozen roses, it was 11 roses because they had been married for 11 years. Well, my mom got that, and she was mad. She's like, "He couldn't even give me a dozen roses, just like he couldn't go out, just like he couldn't take us out on our anniversary because he had to go do his computer thing." This is years later. She did not forgive. She kept harboring it, and she kept bringing it up. Love doesn't keep score. We don't sit and give a little tally of how many times we've been hurt and then turn around and try to hurt the other person later to get them back for how they've hurt us. We go back to our 1 Corinthians chapter 13 passage. Verse 5 tells us that love is not easily provoked. Verse 7 says that love endures all things. What that means, wife and husband out there, is maybe you have been wronged by your spouse, and maybe you were hurt by that person. You need to make a decision, and if you're going to have a loving marriage, that decision needs to be this. It says, "I am going to be kind, and I am going to share kindness no matter what. I am not going to harbor this anymore." Love does not keep bringing up past failures. If you've done wrong, you admit that you're wrong, you confess it, and you have to move on. Love does not keep bringing up past failures. If I hurt my wife, if I hurt Samantha, then I am going to go to her and I am going to admit to her what I did wrong. I'm going to confess it to her. And then at that point, she has 2 options. She can either take on the role of justice, or she can take on the role of forgiveness. Only two options. She has only two things that she can do. She can take on the role of justice or the role of forgiveness. If she takes on the role of justice, she decides she is going to be my judge. And she is going to say, I judge you not as my mate, but as a felon. Love says, I don't judge you, I forgive you, because you're my mate. Taking the path of justice takes away intimacy. When you put justice into your relationship and you are the judge of your mate, you remove all intimacy from that relationship. Taking the path of forgiveness is the way into intimacy. Will you please stop doing that? Thank you very much. Taking the role of forgiveness is the way into intimacy. And let me say this. Don't mess up today and every future day with yesterday. That's again going back to what I was just talking about bringing up past failures. Don't mess up today and every new day by bringing up yesterday. Love is kind words, not bitter words, not revenge, not resentment. And if you're going to speak the language of love, your failures need to be history. And your mate's failures need to be history. You need to make that decision. If you are having a problem today and you keep bringing up those things in your life and you're listening to me out there with your mate, you keep bringing up their mistakes and they keep bringing up mistakes. If you want to have a loving marriage and a loving relationship, you need to make that decision that their failures are in the past. My failures are in the past. You know, you can't erase the past by continuing to bring them up. You have to let them go. You have to let them be in the past. If you're going to be together, you've decided they have made those mistakes. I'm okay with those mistakes. I forgive those mistakes. Now forgive them. And don't look at them anymore. You need to move on. You have got to move on past those mistakes. Quit bringing those failures up. You know, Christian, if you're saved listening to me out there, think about that with the Heavenly Father. You know, you come to Him, you confess your sins, you ask Him to forgive you of your sins and come into your heart and to save you. How is it going to be if He keeps judging you for those things that He's forgiven you for? That's not a very good thing. And we as Christians, we're so thankful that God has forgiven our sins and our trespasses and our iniquities and our transgressions of all the things that we did before we got saved. And He doesn't remember them anymore. And they're forgotten and they're washed in the blood. How terrible it would be for Him to keep on bringing those sins up. But you, is even though we bask in that forgiveness of God, but you keep bringing up your mate's failures and the things that they've done. You need to let those go. The fourth dialect is humble words. Humble words. Love requests. It doesn't make demands. And by the way, let me just say this. It is different in your marriage than it is with your children. Children, you can love them and you can make demands. I don't say to my kids, would you like to brush your teeth today? Or how do you feel about taking a shower? Is that something you would like to do? Or maybe if you would like to, you could take the trash out. No, I don't say this. I say, take out the trash, brush your teeth, go to bed. I love you, and do it. All right, I can make demands of my children. Why? Because I want to teach them a lifestyle and learn of a pattern of obedience and discipline in their life. My mate is different. My mate is not my child. She is my mate. And you don't speak to your mate in demands, but in requests and humility. Why? Because we're equals, because we're partners. A request, let me give you an example for those of you who don't know. A request would be something like this. Honey, I miss my friends Paul and Kim. I would like to invite them up for dinner sometime. Would you be okay with me if I did that? That's a request. A demand is this. Hey, I invited Paul and Kim up to dinner tonight. Make sure that you cook enough food so there's enough for all of us to eat. That's a demand. And if there was any love that was going to be put into this, there's no love that's going to be put into that dinner with that second way that it was put. There is no love in that. Love makes requests. Love doesn't make demands. She might say, honey, I've noticed how tall the grass has gotten, and I didn't want to bother you about it because I know how hard you work, but I was wondering if you have some extra time, maybe this week, do you think you might get the chance to mow the lawn? And if you can't, because I know how busy you are, would you rather me call someone and I could have them mow the lawn for it? That's your request. Or she could say, listen, Buster, I know you think it's cool to have the tallest grass in the whole flippin' county, but if you don't get out there soon, we're going to get turned into code enforcement. I wish you'd turn off that TV, get off your rear end, and get it done. That's a demand. Now listen, which one of these husbands do you think is going to want to do and go out and mow that lawn? The first one. The first one, of course. Requests affirm worth and ability. Demands doesn't say lover, it says tyrant. If all that wife ever does is demand, then that husband, he ceases to be a lover in her life, and she is a tyrant to him. Husband, if all you do is demand, your wife is sick of you. You're a tyrant, not a lover. In closing, this first love language, would all of you agree with me today that everyone wants a little bit of affirmation? I mean, you listening here, you can get yelled and screamed at, and that's not very pleasant. Wouldn't you rather be told about how good you are, how much we love you? Everyone needs some affirmation. Now, some of you might be sitting here saying, okay, preacher, I've listened to this whole sermon, and everything that you said, and all of this is silly. I mean, I've decided I couldn't care less about words of affirmation, and that might be true. There actually might be some of you listening out there that the way that if people and compliments and stuff, that just really doesn't do anything for you. But let me tell you something about yourself. If you don't need it, I'd be willing to bet very strongly that you're not giving it either. And the reality is that you might not need it, others do, and you need to learn to give it. And some of you could be saying, okay, I'll try it, and maybe it'll mean something to her, but I really don't think it's going to mean anything to me. Well, if that's the reason, if that's how you feel, then the reason for that is probably because words of affirmation is not the love language that you speak. You probably speak one of the others. And that will bring us to the second one, which we will hopefully be able to be getting to in our next service. Now, I don't know how long I've been preaching tonight. I thank you for staying with me. This really wasn't an evangelistic service. I'm not sitting here telling you how you need to get saved and how you need to you repent of your sins in order to get to heaven. But that is how you get to heaven. You need to ask God to forgive you of your sins and repent of your sins to be able to get to heaven. And it kind of goes along with this when we're talking about bringing up those past failures. I mean, you're going to come to your spouse and ask them to forgive you for the things that they've done, and you and them the same for you, in order to be able to affirm and lift each other up. That same thing needs to be done with the Heavenly Father, or you're not going to get to heaven. And, sometimes preachers don't always sit here and preach on trying to get people saved, because you know what? People in the church need some help in other areas too. And as we get through these next sermons, these aren't going to be very evangelistic possibly. Some of them might be a little bit more than others. But we're trying to help you in your relationships with each other. And tonight's service was on our first language of love, on our Valentine's Day service, words of affirmation, being able to give those necessary compliments to each other. I hope that you got a blessing out of today's service. And I have some homework for you as a result. I want you, if you're listening to me, I want you to try really hard this week to not be critical of your mate. I want you to try to look at things that they do that's right, and I want you to compliment them on that. If there's something that your mate is not doing around the house that you would like them to do, I want you to forget about even mentioning that and compliment them on something else that they do that's well. I want you to take this test this week, and I want you to look for things that you can do to affirm other people in your life and try to lift them up. And especially if it's true, if you or your mate, your love language is words of affirmation, and this is how you communicate love, then this message is so important. Now, next week, we're going to be getting into, I'm going to try for the next 2 love languages, and I'm not going to tell you which ones there are. It's going to be a surprise. So you come back next week for our service so you can learn those next 2 important love languages. Sorry we couldn't get them all tonight, but it's Valentine's Day, and I don't want to be preaching to you all day. You need to go out and eat and kiss and stuff like that, and all of that kind of mushy-gushy things like that. All right, so you go and do that. Thank you for spending some time with us today at the Sword and Trowel Revival Fellowship, and I encourage you to come back and join us again. May God bless you as you go on your day. Take care. Thanks for joining us.